this spiritual narrative of being free from karma is super toxic and it's very much old paradigm because in Sanskrit, karma is just like basically the law of cause and effect. And essentially, it just means that every action has a consequence. And then this whole additional narrative was added to it that there are good consequences and bad consequences. And you have to pay for the bad consequences and you're given blessings for the good consequences. And that is, in my opinion, it's nonsense. And I don't know whether it was Buddhism or Hinduism, when they spoke about being free from karma, the original teaching or that freedom from karma is detachment from the consequence, whether it's good or bad, because you cannot control the consequence, you cannot control the outcome, and you have no idea, like because of butterfly effect, the smallest thing can spiral out into the biggest thing, which can be terrible or great, and you will never know. You will never know how a single word said to a single person could have had the best effect or the worst effect. So how can you actually, like, if you're attached to that narrative, you'll be paying millions of lifetimes for all the shit that you've said, right? So, and even if you want to have the best intentions and have the best consequences, you cannot control them. Like you may have the best intentions, and then people react completely in a different way that you can't calculate and expect. So, like the whole thing of this version of karma is so calculating and so mental that it's not got anything to do with spirit and spirituality, in my opinion. It's just an ego game. Real freedom from karma is detachment from the consequence of your actions. That you do your thing and you drop it. You cannot control what happens with it. So a lot of times people are saying, I want to have a positive impact and I want to be a force for good. You cannot actually determine whether you'll have a positive impact or a negative impact and whether you'll be a force for good or evil. Like this is what a lot of gurus end up doing, that they have good intentions, but a lot of the times they have toxic impact because unconsciously they're disempowering people and they don't even realize it. And religions are doing the same, and all kinds of institutions and people are doing the same, that you cannot calculate what will have a positive and a negative impact. Like you do your thing without deciding how it will turn out and how it will affect people.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, stop trying to control effectively.
The real notion of spirit for me is that it just moves through people and it does what needs to be done. And sometimes that means bringing pain and suffering to people. And it has its messengers for that. Like, in my view, I can say that Hitler was the force of the spirit. It caused the impact it needed to cause through all of that. And it will ripple out through decades and centuries. And to think that it was the cause of one man's actions is the silliest thought possible. Like, that's the spirit moving, is that whether it's moving through Jesus or through Hitler, it's doing its thing, it's doing its magic, it's doing what it needs to do. And if it moves through you, you cannot calculate whether it will be a good force or an evil force. Like whatever needs to move through you and whatever needs to happen. Now that doesn't mean that you use that as an excuse to just go and be a shit person and do whatever the fuck you want and say, oh, it was a spirit. As much as you can, like that's why I said that there is such a thing as healthy ego and you can navigate, but beyond the point I am saying you cannot control what will happen. You can intend positively, but it doesn't mean you can control the outcome. And that doesn't mean that Hitler is suffering in hell for the rest of his life. Because that again is like, oh, he must have gone to hell because of all that he did. Maybe he's in heaven because he played a role that no one else was willing to play. Like, think about that. Like, which soul would be willing to play that role? And maybe like God blessed him and he went to the highest of heavens because he took on a role that no one was daring to take on in this reality. It's just a perspective and a story, right? Like it's all about interpretation. As if that was a very important role to be played in this movie of Earth, like that's got the biggest reward.
It is so, yeah, interesting to consider that we do need people to play those roles. And, not just the Hitlers, but like the petty tyrants and all of those, I'm sure everyone has some of those in their lives. And without them, there just wouldn't be anything. There just wouldn't be any change. There would be no growth, be no anything. It's not that it would be utopia. There would be nothing. I don't think any
Exactly.
life would be life because life needs
Exactly. And
the force of that. Yeah.
that's the whole point, is that spirituality is all about the balance between the forces. And once we really come to understand that there is no such thing as a positive and a negative force, it's just forces balancing out each other, then you start seeing, and there is this notion in spirituality that it is like in your soul family, it is the people who love you the most take on the roles to hurt you, because that's what you need to experience. And it's the same with Hitler, right? Like, it's probably God who loves Earth the most is coming down as Hitler to have that experience. Someone needs to have that experience. So it's really to take out all judgment from the narrative and just be like, okay, this is just the story. Let's not put any value judgment on.
Yeah, so it's like coming back to, as you said, the old paradigm is about the heaven and hell, and
Mhm.
so much of old spirituality is about also, yeah, the toxic positivity. And if everybody was spiritual, if everybody did LSD or ayahuasca, then we would live in this utopia
Mhm.
dream. If everybody, did personal development work, if everybody did therapy, it's that.
All the
um
problems will be fixed. There'll be no more suffering. Like, this is what people don't get, is that everyone is trying to end suffering
yes, yeah.
instead of accepting that it's just part, like pain is part of life. If you don't resist it, there's no suffering. But people are always resisting, and that's what produces more and more suffering.